The CWD Symposium presents The Bond Between Science and Disability, Forging New Capabilities for Inclusion, which was featured at the 256th ACS National Meeting in New Orleans. We are honored to have Amie E. Norton give a PowerPoint presentation on the Dyslexic Advantage.
So today I want to talk about the Dyslexic Advantage, and this is really kind of my story. I want to be careful not to stereotype or blanket everybody's story in this. But I wanted to start out with a dyslexic simulation, and I'll kind of talk through this video and just start out with what is dyslexia. And I think when everybody thinks of dyslexia, they think of people turning letters around and reading backwards, but actually it's deeper than that, and it's really a visual disturbance when reading. And sometimes it's communication, sometimes the output of information is difficult. And so I had this video, which hopefully plays. And so the video just shows that if it played, just how a dyslexic would read. And so some people think that dyslexia actually has to do with IQ, but it actually has nothing to do with IQ. Albert Einstein is thought to be a dyslexic, and he had an IQ of 160. And according to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Statistics, they estimate that over 40 million adults have dyslexic or some form of it, and only 2 million know of it. And 20% of school-age children are dyslexic. And I just want to show this graphic. It's a graph of non-impaired IQ reading and dyslexic IQ reading. And what it shows is that as IQ goes up with the non-impaired, their reading level goes up. But with a dyslexic, as their IQ goes up, their reading level doesn't really go up. It goes up a little bit, but it plateaus. And they were able to do a brain scan of what a dyslexic brain looks like when they read compared to a non-impaired. And what they found was differences. And so a non-impaired or brain, when they're reading, actually highlights in 3 different areas. But a dyslexic brain, it actually only lights up right in one area. And so I'd like to tell actually my story really quickly. And so growing up, I actually have 2 invisible learning disabilities. One is a fine motor skill, and the other one is a dyslexia. And growing up, I went through speech therapy, but at some point they told me that they couldn't help me any longer, and my parents worked with me at home. And with my fine motor skills, my mom got me tested when I was like about to go in the kindergarten, and they said there wasn't much they could do for me. Just work with me at home, and my mom worked with me extra hours, how to tie my shoe and that stuff. And I was able to do all those skills eventually. I just worked harder with my mom. I actually, my mom worked through my spelling and stuff when I had spelling test extra hours at home. And then when I wrote papers, my mom would sit down and edit with me. And so reading was a challenge when I read technical papers. When I read fictional, I tend to read not linear. I read like this. So when I read fictional books, it's not as much of a problem. I can fill in the blanks. But I noticed that I was having more difficulties in undergraduate and grad school. And I got tested in grad school, and they basically told me, "We're shocked that you made it this far." And what they told me was that I should find positivity in my learning disability after they told me all the bad parts of my learning disability. And I found that if I had learned everything they had told me when I was very young, I would have found it very discouraging. And I was actually very thankful that I had gotten tested later in my life, because I was raised around people who had championed me and told me I could be anything I wanted to. No one had put me in a box. When they talked to me in a way where I felt they were putting me in a box. And they wanted to do things for me that I felt limited me. And they said, I can tell that you don't want to go our way. And I said, thank you for your time. I'm glad I know this, but I'll find my own accommodations and I'll work myself. I had learned to be independent my whole life, and I wasn't going to be limited at this point in my life. And so I reflected, and what I realized was that my learning disability was like an elephant in the room that I always try to hide from. And what I needed to do was find peace and positivity out of it. And I needed to reflect on how this made me a better person personally, but also I think that people are different and think differently, and there has to be some advantages. So I did my own research, and I started to research, could there be any advantages to dyslexia that we overlook? And can we start telling kids with dyslexia, yeah, you have all these bad things, you can't spell very well, but look, over on this other side of the coin, you do these other things really well. And can we give them this positive message? And so I hope at the end of my talk, you really see this positivity. And so personally, this is what I learned. I learned determination. I never really gave up. And with that comes tenacity in this work ethic. I had to work extra hours and stuff, but if I gave up on different things, you know, with my fine motor skill and reading problems and spelling problems, I would be giving up on myself. And so with that came this ingraining of having this strong determination to succeed. Also, I'm a really good problem solver, and that goes into researching. And that's because I always have to find my own way to do things. You know, I might not do the same way as somebody else, but I can find my own avenue. And I think sometimes, you know, people saying you can't do something gives you a good motivation in life. And I have a great compassion for those around me because I know what it means to struggle and to have to overcome different things. I want to give you some statistics on people with dyslexia. And one thing is that school dropouts for dyslexia is 35% in high school, and that's twice as many as the national average. And it's estimated that barely 2% of dyslexics enrolled in undergraduate programs make it through. And I was almost one of those percents. I had a really bad semester, and I didn't realize that it was because I hadn't learned how to overcome some of my challenges. And my first thought was, maybe I'm just too dumb to make it through. But what I did was during the summer, I talked to my parents, and I came up with maybe if I just spread out my classes and took my time, and I did end up with a degree in chemistry. And then when you look at prison figures, it's thought in juvenile offenders, 85% of them have a reading disability. And I thought, why is my life so different than those other people who have dyslexia? And I don't know if anybody has seen The Help, but in The Help, Abilene Clark says to the little girl, You are kind, you are smart, and you are important. And to me, she's a champion. And I have champions in my life. And they taught me how to be my own champion. And I think that that's important when we are around these people, when we are around kids in general, and when we're around kids with dyslexia. When I talk to my parents, whenever I talk to my parents when I had a bad semester in college or something, they encouraged me and said, you know, you can make it. We know you're smart, and you know, they really encouraged me. But had I not had that, I could have been one of the statistics. But I want to give you some hope that some of our greatest inventors were dyslexic. Albert Einstein, Thomas Edison, Faraday, Leonardo da Vinci, Aaron Barakovich. And so there's some hope here that 40% of self-made millionaires are dyslexic. Dyslexics tend to go into engineer, the arts, computer design, architecture. They're innovators. And so they're twice as more likely than the general population. And so to me, I see that overall my dyslexia can be a gift. And so the reason for this is that our brain structure is actually different. And one reason is that the folding in our brain, the brain tissue, folds are larger than than in a normal brain, and that allows the two hemispheres more conductivity between the two hemispheres in the brain. And so we're really good at big picture thinking and that kind of thinking. And so with this interconnectivity, we can be good problem solvers. A lot of us are creative. But most dyslexics are experiential learning. And when I think about the sciences and the STEM learning, I think about, isn't that what research is? We're in the lab, we're observing, we're thinking about our observations, we're changing what we do, and then we're going back through it. It's an experience. And so I think that having this experiential kind of learning is very helpful. And so I read some books, and so because of this differences in how we think, the strengths, some dyslexics have strengths in spatial reasoning, this interconnection reasoning, so they can see patterns really well. They're really good at narrative reasoning. So a lot of authors are actually, there are some authors that are actually dyslexic. And then dynamic reasoning, so they can make connections between topics that you wouldn't think were actually connected. So I just want to conclude, and in conclusion, I just want to say that I think we should be a champion for others and for yourself. And I think in the sciences there's a need for diverse thinking and big pictures thinking. And also at the scientific table, we need to have a bigger table and not put up barriers. And everybody brings their own unique perspective to science and their own voice, and it's important that we value that. And when we all work together with diverse perspectives, we can bring a unique solution to big problems. And so I'd like to thank the Chemists with Disabilities Committee, and I'd like to thank VGSU, and I'd like to thank Lee for putting this together, and all of you for listening. and I'd be happy to take any questions.
For more information, please contact us at cwd@acs.org. Check out these other videos and follow us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @ACS_CWD. Also connect with us on Facebook at cwd.acs/. This video is brought to you by the American Chemical Society, the world's largest scientific society.